Last week, the White House hosted two significant meetings involving U.S. President Donald Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. These discussions focused on the ongoing war in Ukraine and broader geopolitical concerns, with each leader presenting their respective perspectives and priorities. In his meeting with President Trump, Emmanuel Macron emphasized the need for continued transatlantic cooperation and European strategic independence. Macron reiterated Europe's commitment to supporting Ukraine while also stressing the importance of reducing reliance on U.S. security guarantees. He underscored France's position that Europe must take more responsibility for its own defense, particularly as global geopolitical shifts alter traditional alliances. Macron also discussed ongoing European initiatives, including potential peacekeeping efforts and defense coordination within the EU. While differences in approach between the US and France were evident, both leaders appeared keen on maintaining strong bilateral relations and discussing how best to manage Europe's role in global security. Separately, President Zelensky met with President Trump to discuss Ukraine's situation and the future of U.S. support. Zelensky's visit came at a time when discussions about continued assistance to Ukraine were evolving, and he sought assurances regarding American backing in Ukraine's efforts to defend itself against Russian aggression. One of the major topics was a proposed agreement related to Ukraine's rare earth minerals, which could offer economic benefits to both countries while influencing long-term strategic cooperation. The leaders also addressed broader security considerations, including the role of international support in ensuring Ukraine's stability. Following their meetings, Macron and Trump addressed the media separately, with Macron focusing on European security strategies and the role of the U.S. in global affairs. Meanwhile, Trump and Zelensky also held a separate press conference, where discussions centered on Ukraine's economic and military needs, as well as the evolving relationship between the two nations. Both meetings provided an opportunity for each leader to articulate their country's stance on Ukraine and international security, reflecting the diverse approaches being considered in addressing the ongoing war and the broader realignment of global alliances. During his meeting with President Trump, Zelensky represented a leader immersed in the immediate realities of war. His military-inspired attire, symbolic of Ukraine's ongoing struggle, was a visual reminder of the high stakes his nation faced. His presence was marked by urgency and a direct appeal for continued U.S. support, emphasizing the human cost of the conflict and the need for unwavering international backing. For Zelensky, leadership was about solidarity, resilience, and the moral imperative to defend his country at all costs. Trump, in contrast, embodied a different kind of leadership, one shaped by branding, perception, and strategic positioning. Dressed in his signature suit and red tie, his approach to the meeting was measured, calculated, and transactional. Known for his focus on deal-making, Trump appeared more interested in exploring alternative arrangements for U.S. support, such as the proposed rare earth minerals deal, which would tie economic incentives to military assistance. His style of diplomacy, marked by pragmatism over sentimentality, stood in contrast to Zelensky's emotional appeals for solidarity and long-term commitment. Meanwhile, in his separate meeting with President Trump, French President Emmanuel Macron sought to reinforce Europe's strategic independence while maintaining cooperation with the United States. Macron's message was clear. Europe must take greater responsibility for its own security rather than rely solely on American leadership. He reiterated France's commitment to Ukraine's defense, while also advocating for a more autonomous European foreign policy, one that would not be dictated by shifting U.S. priorities. Macron's vision for Europe as a more assertive and self-sufficient force resonated with many European leaders. However, the challenge remained. Could Europe, often divided on major security issues, truly step into this role? While Macron's call for a stronger Europe aligned with growing concerns over U.S. disengagement from global security affairs, questions lingered over whether European nations could act collectively and decisively. The meetings underscored the deepening rift between Western allies and highlighted the changing dynamics of global leadership. Zelensky remained focused on securing Ukraine's survival, Macron championed European autonomy, and Trump emphasized a more transactional, America-first approach. As each leader left Washington, the future of transatlantic cooperation remained uncertain, shaped by differing visions of leadership, strategy, and global responsibility in an era of shifting alliances. The rare earth metals deal proposed by U.S. President Donald Trump introduced a new dimension to the discussions surrounding U.S. support for Ukraine. This was not just an ordinary trade agreement, it carried significant geopolitical and economic implications that could redefine alliances and global supply chains. The proposal outlined that in exchange for increased military and financial support, Ukraine would grant the United States preferential access to its vast reserves of rare earth minerals. These minerals are essential components in the production of advanced technologies, including smartphones, electric vehicles, and military hardware. Given their strategic importance, the deal was seen as an opportunity for the United States to secure a stable supply while simultaneously aiding Ukraine in its defense against Russian aggression. Ukraine is one of the world's leading producers of rare earth elements, making its resources highly sought after by many nations. The proposal placed this issue at the forefront of international politics, drawing attention to the economic and security stakes involved. While the deal promised significant benefits for both countries, it also carried considerable risks. Supporters viewed it as a pragmatic arrangement that would strengthen both Ukraine's defensive capabilities and the United States' technological supply chains. However, critics saw it as a form of economic imperialism, arguing that it positioned the United States to exploit Ukraine's natural resources under the pretense of providing assistance. For Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, the proposal posed a complex challenge. While his country was in urgent need of increased aid, he remained cautious about the long-term consequences of such an agreement. He understood the immediate benefits but also recognized the risks of becoming too dependent on the United States. A deal of this nature could shift the balance of power in ways that might leave Ukraine vulnerable to external influence, creating economic dependencies that could be leveraged for strategic gains in the future. The challenge for Zelensky was to weigh the urgent need for military and financial support against the possibility of future exploitation and loss of economic sovereignty. Beyond Ukraine, the proposal also drew criticism from European leaders who viewed it as a destabilizing factor in Eastern Europe. The European Union had its own vested interests in Ukraine and was concerned that this arrangement would weaken its influence in the region. There was apprehension that the deal signaled a shift in U.S. priorities, focusing more on securing economic advantages than on addressing the broader strategic concerns related to Ukraine's defense. European leaders argued that such an agreement could set a troubling precedent, where nations facing crises might be pressured into similar trade-offs in exchange for critical support. The deal quickly became a focal point of diplomatic tensions, highlighting the growing rift between the United States and its traditional allies. The proposal underscored the differing priorities and approaches among Western nations, further straining transatlantic relations. While Ukraine sought aid and security, the United States pursued a strategic economic interest, and Europe wrestled with the implications of being sidelined in the process. The debate surrounding the deal reflected broader discussions about global power dynamics, influence, and the future of international cooperation. More than just a trade agreement, the rare earth metals deal symbolized the evolving nature of global politics. It showcased the complex interplay between national interests and international responsibilities, raising fundamental questions about how economic power and strategic alliances are negotiated in times of crisis. As discussions continued, the world watched closely, recognizing that the outcome of this proposal would not only shape Ukraine's future, but also redefine the balance of power in global trade and diplomacy.